What's going on, guys? History Man back again with another video. I'm sorry it's been a while without me uploading because I've been struggling with some issues, like doing more research on my stuff, and my smart issues. Today I'm going to be doing a video about ancient Egypt. All right. So basically, it started somewhere like a couple thousand BC, and so it was around when Jesus was around, and he basically just kind of taught to everybody. And Napoleon said that he wasn't very fond of what was happening because he wanted to be the number one teacher. And Napoleon, he was a pretty nice guy. I actually had to hit him up for this video, and he said basically that basically what he said back whenever ancient Egypt was around, whenever he was building the pyramids and stuff. He basically said like whatever he did. And whenever sorry, this is going to be a really long video. There's a lot to explain. When the pyramids were built, there was a lot of hidden messages in the pyramids. Like the Queen herself from the UK. And the Queen told Napoleon that what she thought he was doing was wrong. That was protesting the teaching and stuff. So that basically happened. And about the stuff that they found in the pyramids, they basically found a lot of rocks in there, a lot of caskets. They found a lot of rocks, and there were some caskets in there. A lot of the old bodies and stuff that you usually put in a casket. They found some gold. They found quite a bit of gold. I'll have to trim that out of there. I'm sorry, ignore the animal slaughter going on in the background. They found a lot of chicken, a lot of live ones.
Chicken.
They found a lot of albums. They found a lot of cool music from back then recorded in the studios that they had in the pyramids. They had a lot of vinyl records, because back then they had the technology that we have right now in 2021. They had to record it, and the maximum was 2 minutes long. They had to record it onto the vinyl records, and each song had to be under 2 minutes because they didn't want the vinyl to be overloaded.
Does Juice WRLD record it?
No, Juice WRLD wasn't alive then, silly. But yeah, like nowadays you don't have to record this stuff in the vinyls anymore because how advanced we are in technology. Now, back then there were a lot of sandstorms, and sandstorms really interfered with the studios that they had back then. They weren't able to record all the time, and a lot of it in the pyramid that they lived in, there weren't very insulated walls, so that you couldn't hear most of the sound very correctly. So with a lot of wind happening there, just things like that, basically. I'm running out of time here because I'm pretty sure I got demonetized, but but yeah, they didn't have nearly much technology we have now, and they didn't have as good a stuff as we have now, because basically it's not You know what I'm saying? The instruments that they had back then weren't as good as they have now. They didn't have guitars. They didn't have drum sets. They had to play on like the rib cages of woolly mammoths by using their own bones. They didn't have, because they didn't have drumsticks. They didn't even know what drumsticks were, so they used the bones as drumsticks, basically. And back then, they used transportation. They had to use 98 Ford Thunderbirds because back then there weren't very good there weren't very good cars back then, and that was a long time ago. 98, and they had sometimes they were in horse and carriage too. Depends on what part of the Egypt they were on, because a lot of it had to do with sandstorms and the way that they would blow the cars. See, in the less ancient parts of ancient Egypt, the ground was pretty flat, so there wasn't much sand to be blown, and a lot of it was grass. In the more ancient sides, that was after the glacier. No, the less ancient sides. The less ancient sides had less. The less ancient sides had more. The less ancient sides had more. Had less flat ground because it was pretty much formed after the glacier. After the glacier, everything was flat except for the parts that ancient couldn't hit. The glacier didn't hit. The more ancient sides had really flat ground from where the glacier passed right by it, and so therefore they were allowed to use horse and carriage, and they weren't allowed to use 98 Ford Thunderbirds. They and a lot of it came down to Pharaoh and what he decided on what the car should be, because like in Cuba right now, they're still a communist country, so they don't have cars other than the ones that Russia supplied to them when they were whenever Russia was part of communism too with them. They basically just comes down to what Pharaoh says. Pharaoh, there were parts of ancient Egypt were communist and are communist because that's what they believe in. And you have to learn to respect what they believe in, because they don't feel like starting what's going on today. Now, personally, I support the illegalization of 498 Thunderbirds, but they did not support them back in ancient Egypt whenever communism was around, because they felt like 498 Thunderbirds were a pretty good thing to help transport them, which I agree, cars help transport you, but the real question is, do they help transport you, well, I guess, because really it's quality over quantity. You can have many 498 Thunderbirds as you want, doesn't mean they're all going to run as well as the other one. That is why communism didn't work. It all has the same main idea. Everybody gets the same thing, but doesn't mean it's going to work. That doesn't mean anything. Sorry, getting really worked up. But see, I think you know what I'm saying. It's really just quality over quantity. Like the horse and carriage, it's always reliable. Depends on how good the horse is. If you have a good horse, the horse and carriage is going to work well. You can't be using a pitiful Mustang on a horse and carriage. That's kind of like what they're doing now. They're putting all these big King Pharaohs and 498 Thunderbirds, and therefore the Thunderbird gets stuck and causes it not to drive anymore. That's basically how ancient Egypt is. Not a good country. Not a good period in time. It's not a good time back then, unless you were on the side of Pharaoh. Therefore, you got as much food as you want, got as much anything as you wanted, except for vehicles, of course, because they didn't really know how to work vehicles in 98, other than the Ford Thunderbirds. They used a lot of AR-14s to kill the pharaohs, and a lot of semi-automatic sniper rifles to help destroy the cars because they felt like the cars weren't good enough, and that's talking about the lesser ancient Egypt, of course. But yeah, I think you know what I mean here. Just it's just not as good as it is today in today's ancient Egypt than it was back then in ancient Egypt. Just not as good as the time. I think personally we would have a good time in ancient Egypt because there's not many things to get distracted by. Like today we have phones. Today they had back then they had payphones. Today we don't need payphones. Of course we pay for the phone. I think you know that. But you don't have to pay for it every time you use a call. Today you can use games on it, so it really is a great deal. But yeah, just remember to please stay safe in today's ancient Egypt because there's a lot of communism that goes around there, and a lot of bad stuff. Like there's no more 498 Thunderbirds, and they're using the 2021 Ford Thunderbirds. They because of 21, of course. Today they play Madden. Back then they played Pong. It's just we're far more advanced than they were in ancient Egypt. And today's ancient Egypt, they don't have to play Pong anymore. Of course, I'm sure you could download an app on it somewhere with your cell phone if you wanted to play Pong. But it's just you don't have to. I don't know many people of mine that would play Pong. Like, would you, Kayla? Would you play Pong?
Yeah.
Well, no, you're not. Would you play Pong, Xavier?
Nope.
See, exactly. Nobody wants to play Pong anymore. They don't do much in Pong. James, would you play Pong?
Yes.
Yeah, that's why I didn't ask you. But yeah, it's just a lot more advanced in today's ancient Egypt than it was back then. But that's basically all I want to talk to you about because people like talking. Like me, I like debating with people. And back then, they didn't have many debates. Because you couldn't really do much. It's not like you could overthrow the government like you can now. Because back in '98, they didn't have the Constitution in which you could overthrow the government in ancient Egypt. Like you can in today's ancient Egypt. And that's all I want to talk to you about, guys, today. Talk to you guys today about. And yeah, it was a good talking to you guys.